What is going on, all you wonderful late plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys my review for Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 1, Episode 1, or, it might just be Episode 1. I don't know if they have any other seasons planned after this current season. I am also kind of sorry that I don't really have any cool graphics to go around for, like, the border like we usually do for our reviews, how we have, like, specific outlines for each individual show. I honestly had completely forgotten that the show was coming out today, so I didn't think to get anything prepared for this review. Literally, this review is very impromptu, and that's also why it's very late, because it was literally just the only time I could get it out. It's also why I'm doing it live, because I had no chance to prepare a review to just upload to the channel. So this is, if this opening isn't enough to indicate it, this is going to be a very disorganized review, so I do apologize for that, but hopefully it'll still be entertaining nonetheless. I'm also going to give you a big warning here and tell you that there are going to be major spoilers for this episode, because there was a lot that happened in it, and not to mention, I mean, come on guys, we had an hour and 12-minute opening episode. Like, how often does that happen for an animated series? I mean, yeah, you could say for the Clone Wars, that whole series started off with a movie, but in this particular case, the Bad Batch wasn't exactly meant to have like the theatrical promotion that Star Wars: The Clone Wars had. And this was just going straight to Disney Plus, so I don't think anyone expected the first episode to be this long. Not that I'm complaining, mind you. That's like one thing really cool about this too. It was an hour and 12 minutes, and yet I was never really bored watching this. And I think it kind of comes down to, this really felt less like a full-length film, and it felt like they just had like several different episodes that they kind of put together. Like, this felt like 3 or 4 episodes that they put together to make into like one really long opening premiere, which again is very similar to what they did with the Clone Wars movie, because the Clone Wars movie was originally meant to be just 3 episodes, but George Lucas liked them so much he wanted to put it all into one movie and premiere it in theaters. So that all being said, there's a lot that happened, so there will definitely be spoilers right from the beginning of this review, which I'm about to get into. So the way this episode starts, man, because right off the bat, I was actually kind of on the edge of my seat. Before, I'm just kind of relaxed, I'm like ready to enjoy this, and then they open it up with our usual narration, but this, it's narrated by the same guy who's been narrating the Clone Wars for so long. But what was always so fascinating about that during the Clone Wars is that the guy who's always narrating it in the show, he's actually one of the admirals of the Clone Wars, of the Republic, I should say, which later on becomes the Empire. And we see this guy reprising his role, the voice actor in Star Wars Rebels. We see that he's one of the admirals when it comes to Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. We see him as one of the admirals sitting around on the table. And so we know that this guy eventually becomes a bad guy. So in a sense, you're looking at the Clone Wars and the opening narrations, even though we are rooting for the Republic to win, against the Separatists. It is kind of funny when you put in the perspective that, it's all propaganda from the perspective of someone who eventually does become the villain later on. So one thing that I'm kind of wondering if we're going to get in episode 2 of this series, maybe if we continue with the opening narrations that we got in this first episode and the opening narrations that we've gotten in the Clone Wars, it kind of makes me wonder, are we going to be getting like an opening narration, but now it's all going to be 100% in the perspective of the Empire? Because to me, I feel like that would be the perfect next step. I think, we're following a group, the Bad Batch, who isn't by the end of this episode no longer with the Empire, but we're still getting but if we still get the propaganda, but now no longer in the perspective of the Republic, but now in the perspective of the Empire, I think that would be really, really cool thematically for Star Wars anyways. So that's just how I felt like during the opening when I saw, like, it was the same guy narrating, because, my imagination ran wild. I'm like, oh my gosh, does this mean we're going to get like propaganda type videos for the Empire? Because I think that would work so cool. So, that was awesome in its own, on its own. So then we get to the actual plot as it plays out, and we right off the bat again get introduced to a very familiar character that I was not expecting at all to see in this. So we get Caleb Dune, who, for those of you guys who do not know, it later changes his name to oh god, how am I blanking on his name? Sorry, Kanan Jarrus is his name that he changes his name to later on. So Caleb Dune, we see him as a young Padawan, and it was funny because I was texting Adam and Indy about this, and one thing that Indy was saying when he was watching this episode is he's like wondering, why does a 12-year-old sound like an adult who smokes? And I'm just kind of like, because it's voiced by the same guy. It's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., same guy who voiced him in Star Wars Rebels. So yeah, I do agree. That was a bit, to me, that was kind of funny, seeing that they kept the same voice actor to play a younger version of him. If it were up to me, I would have kind of gone with someone younger, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it took me out of it. I still thought it was really cool that we got to see him. And then on top of that, the great continuity that there was in the beginning. Now, I never read the novel that was kind of a prequel to Star Wars Rebels. I know that Kanan, I keep kind of debating with myself in my head whether or not I want to call him Caleb or Kanan. I'm just going to call him Kanan because, I mostly know him from Star Wars Rebels. But anyways, I never saw the prequel novel with him where it kind of went over his full backstory. So I'm not sure how well the continuity lines up with the novel. But I can tell you from someone who's seen Star Wars Rebels, the continuity lined itself up perfectly with Star Wars Rebels. And I was worried about that at first because when I saw that he was working with the Bad Batch and I saw that the Bad Batch weren't exactly, affected by Order 66, my initial thought was, oh man, now this is going to make Caleb look like such a hypocrite, because then we're going to cut to Rebels and we're going to see that he doesn't trust any clones, even though the Bad Batch never betrayed him. But no, we actually do see a good reason for him to not trust the Bad Batch, because in this scene, we established that Crosshairs, and he's the sniper of the group, is actually affected by Order 66. Even though the rest of the Bad Batch aren't, he is, and he actually tries to execute Caleb several times, even after Hunter keeps trying to assure Caleb that they're all on the same time. You get Crosshairs just kind of ruining that trust. And so now you have Caleb being even more conflicted than ever before. So if anything, it really adds a lot of concrete reasons as to why he doesn't trust any clones at all when it comes to Star Wars Rebels. And to me, that's just such an amazing attention to detail right there. Again, I haven't read the prequel graphic novel, so I don't know if the continuity lines up in the novel, but I can tell you just from watching the Clone Wars and from watching Star Wars Rebels, that the continuity lines up perfectly. And wow, that was just so amazing. All this, and this was all just the prologue to the episode, because what follows after that is, of course, all of the clones being called back to the Camino facility, where, of course, they are all, bred from birth and, trained to be soldiers at, the moment they're able to stand on 2 feet. They're like given a blaster and taught how to be a soldier and everything. And, of course, even though they're very skilled, we have Tarkin, who is just, he doesn't believe that the cost that it takes to essentially breed a clone is worth what they get in the end result. So he wants to put an end to the cloning facility. But of course, we have the Kaminoans. I think that's what they're called. I'm not sure. Or how that's pronounced. But anyways, we have the people that run the cloning facility trying to convince them that, the Empire is still going to need the clones. And what's really interesting, I think this is the first time we've really gotten like some insight as to their species and just like what they overall think about the Empire, because before there's always been this mystery with those characters as to how much they actually know what's going on, how much of the Emperor's plan are they actually in on. So we knew that in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, we did find out that they knew about the Emperor's plan to an extent. They knew that the Emperor had some secret inhibitor chip that they wanted to implant in the clones, and we knew that they knew that as soon as the order was given, all the clones would basically be betraying the Jedi, and they knew that they had to keep this a secret from the Jedi. But we do find out in this episode that they apparently never knew about the Empire itself. They never knew what Palpatine's endgame was. They never knew he had the plan on betraying the Jedi and then eventually essentially starting the first galactic empire. So I like how we have like this hesitation coming from them where they're not sure whether or not they should trust the empire itself. And, so on top of that, you still have Tarkin, who's trying to just put an end to the cloning facility. One thing I absolutely love, with Tarkin and his relationship with the Bad Batch is that he doesn't ignore the fact that the Bad Batch are very skilled. In fact, he actually admires that about them. His whole thing is that, of course, the Bad Batch aren't like the other clones where they just blindly do whatever they're told. Like the Bad Batch, they actually ask questions. They, most of the time, even when it was the Republic and not the Empire, they usually go off and do their own thing regardless. They're not the kind of soldiers that just blindly follow orders, right? And I mean, to an extent, you have this with a lot of the other clones, but the big difference is with the other clones, they had the inhibitor chips in them, which essentially took away all of their identity, is really the best way to put it. Whereas the Bad Batch were nothing but they were unique from the time they were born, if that makes sense. Whereas the clones, not so much. They needed the Jedi to really bring out the personality and the individuality. I don't know how you would say that. It felt like it was the Jedi that really made the clones feel like individuals and not like they were part of just one unit. Whereas with the Bad Batch, it feels like they felt like that since the time they were born. And that's what kind of leads them to having much more rebellious attitude than the rest of the clones, which of course Tarkin doesn't like. He doesn't, the Empire doesn't want soldiers that are going to ask questions. They want soldiers that will blindly follow orders. The Empire is literally a metaphor for Nazis. Obviously, I don't think I had to explain that. So of course, characters like the Bad Batch just wouldn't work for the Empire, and Tarkin knows this. So Tarkin, in order to try to test them, he does two things. First, he puts them in a training facility where they're forced to go up against droids that are using live ammunitions, which is majorly against protocol. And he also then sends them on a mission that's just morally messed up, where they're sent to destroy a camp filled with people who are not really rebels yet, because the rebellion hasn't actually started, but people who don't want to conform to the Empire. They haven't done any acts that you could really call terroristic yet. And they also, not to mention, they have a lot of children with them too. And they're not, planning any violent attacks as far as we know yet. So Tarkin sends the Bad Batch to dispose of them in order to test whether or not he can actually trust them. Now, before I continue more into this storyline, I want to talk a little bit more about a new character that we actually got in this series. One that I actually don't really have a strong opinion of yet, just because we haven't gotten much of her, but we get a clone. Again, spoilers. We get a new clone, but this one is actually a female clone. She's also very young, so she's either a very new clone or she might actually be defected in other ways, like maybe she ages in real time instead of aging like at twice the speed like all the other clones. But regardless, we have a new character named Omega, who is also another clone trooper, but very young, and we see that she's really attached to the Bad Batch for a while, but we don't know why. We see that she has some interesting fascination with them. And we find out, like, towards the end of the episode, it's because she's a clone who's also defected, just like the rest of them. And this was something that you could see that the Kaminoans, again, I think that's just such a weird, according to the Wikipedia, which I have right now, that's how it's spelled, is Kimonian. I don't know. See, now I can't even say the planet now, even though I said it just fine earlier. But yeah, anyways, you have them trying to keep her whole identity a secret. And so the Bad Batch have to figure out who she is on their own. And so in the middle of their mission, which they decide not to follow through on because it would involve killing a bunch of innocent people, that's when they discover that she is one of them. And so that's when they decide to try and go back for her. And of course, Crosshairs the entire time is very resistant to Hunter. The entire time there's a lot of tension kind of being built up between Hunter and Crosshairs, because Crosshairs' inhibitor chip is clearly intact, whereas the other Bad Batches aren't. And originally I actually thought they were going to be doing this with Echo, because Echo was never necessarily one of them. He was a clone that turned out just fine. It was just that he had the Separatists doing all these experiments to him later on. But turns out one of these experiments did end up getting rid of his inhibitor chip. So he ended up not, blindly following orders like some of the other clones did, even though he came out, just like the other clones. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. But yeah, they ended up having to go back to the cloning facility in order to try and rescue Omega, now that they know that she's one of them. But of course, they're immediately arrested by upon arrival by Tarkin, because Tarkin now realizes that these aren't the kind of soldiers that are just going to blindly listen to whatever he says. So he has them arrested, except for Crosshairs, because he notices that Crosshairs was resistant to Hunter, even though Crosshairs didn't full on betray Hunter yet. He was resistant to Hunter's orders. So Tarkin brings him into the facility, where they discover that the inhibitor chip didn't go away for him, and that they have a chance to enhance it in order to make it so he'll fully become just like the other clone troopers. But not only that, he'll be a clone trooper that still has his marksman skills that were enhanced for him, but not enhanced for any of the other clones out there. So it ends up working really well, unfortunately. So now he has zero loyalty to Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batches. So he ends up trying to stop them from trying to escape, as well as rescue Omega. But luckily they do get away just in time, and we discover that Omega herself might actually have a few enhancements of her own, because as Hunter is about to put it, or as Crosshairs is about to put an end to Hunter, she ends up picking up a blaster for the very first time, blasting it right at Crosshairs' blaster, causing it to malfunction and causing him to have to drop it, and leaving enough time and room for the rest of the clone for the rest of the Bad Batch to make it away on an escape ship. So one other shout out I really got to get for this episode before I get my final thoughts on the episode definitely has to go to the voice actor D. Bradley Baker. He voices all the clone troopers that we see in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and in this show in particular, he voices all of the Bad Batches. Now, what's so amazing about this is that it's one thing when you're voicing a bunch of clone troopers and they all have the exact same voice, but when it comes to the Bad Batch, even though they're all voiced by the same guy, they don't sound similar at all. And yet he's voicing every single one of them. And what's also kind of amazing about the voice acting in the show is, I guess you have to give it both to the voice acting and the sound editing on this, is that it sounds almost like there's constantly people in the same room having a conversation. It never feels like someone recording their lines and then someone else recording their lines and then putting them together. It sounds like it's a consistent conversation going on. So I don't know if D. Bradley would constantly switch from one voice to another and record that way, or if he just did his lines for one character and then another character, but someone was just so good at editing that it just sounded like a fluid conversation. A lot of times in animated shows, it's very obvious when they do one thing or the other. But in this show, I'm pretty sure what he did is that he said all his lines separately and someone edited it together. But it's done so well that the only reason I'm pretty sure that's why it happened is because it's the same voice actor. If I didn't know these characters were all voiced by the same guy, I would have assumed it was 5 different people and they recorded their lines together instead of separately, because it's that good. The sound editing and voice acting in this show is just so impressive. And seeing how it's 90% of the voice acting is done by one guy, it's almost just it's mind blowing to me. This guy does an amazing job. And I think he may be one of the most talented voice actors out there. I feel like the Clone Wars has some of the most talented voice actors in general. We have another guy, I can't remember his name currently, but he was the guy who did the voice for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what's so amazing about his voice too is the range where he's able to do both Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Oh shoot, I feel bad because I totally forgot. I know it's Alan something, I think, but he also does a really good voice impersonation of Ben Kenobi. So older Obi-Wan Kenobi, but played by Alan something, I think. You know what's funny is I'm going to find out immediately after this broadcast who the name is, and it's going to be nothing like what I was suggesting. But yeah, anyway, so very great voice acting is what I'm getting at for this. And of course, the animation, much like the Clone Wars, is absolutely stellar. I feel like the Clone Wars, for its animation, it really improved during the last 4 episodes in particular, because you could tell these were the episodes that everyone was tuning in the Clone Wars to see. So these were the episodes where they put a lot of, like, the most amount of their effort into. And it feels like that same effort is being carried out in the Bad Batch, and it's being carried out so beautifully. This was a really good pilot, I think, for the series, and I'm definitely looking forward to what's coming afterwards. I really can't think of anything I didn't like in this episode. Something that also really surprised me about it too was its pacing, because it being an hour and 12 minutes long, you would think that there might be a few scenes that kind of drag, but really, it never felt to me like there was anything that really dragged the episode down. Like, I remember I was watching an IGN review for the episode, and that's one of the complaints that they gave, is that they thought the pacing was absolutely, like, well, not, they didn't say absolutely. Sorry, I was over exaggerating a little bit, but they did say that the pacing was the biggest issue they had with the episode. Like, it didn't need to be an hour and 12 minutes, and I can kind of agree that it maybe didn't need to be an hour and 12 minutes. However, I definitely didn't mind it being an hour and 12 minutes, because there wasn't a single scene where I was bored. Even the quieter moments in this episode just felt like really cool character moments, and I don't think there was a single thing I would have personally cut from the episode unless I absolutely had to. But I believe I've covered all the notes that I wanted to cover when talking about this. But so I'll give my final thoughts on this. I thought this was an excellent way to get me excited for the series. Again, I was kind of thinking they were just going to be giving us one 20-minute episode a week, and maybe that's what they're going to do from here on out. Personally, though, because like I said, it feels to me like they took the first 3 or 4 episodes, or what was meant to be the first 3 or 4 episodes, and threw them all together. Almost like they were just doing it because it was like the first arc. And if this show is kind of structured the same way as Clone Wars, it's safe to say that, the next several episodes are going to be several different arcs that will span through several different episodes, right? So like maybe the next arc will be another 3 or 4 episodes, and the arc after that will be another 3 or 4 episodes. I personally would love it, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. In fact, it probably won't. But how cool would it be if for the rest of this series, for the rest of the season, they just gave us the arcs, and they didn't give us like the 20-minute individual episodes. They just would give us, once they're done with one arc, next week, here's the next arc, which is going to be another 3 or 4 episodes. Again, I don't know how Disney plans on publishing these episodes going forward. I personally just think it would be a really excellent way to view this series. But you know what, guys, though? At the end of the day, that's just my A+ opinion. And same with my thoughts on this episode. I thought it was a great opening episode. I definitely look forward to seeing the rest of this series as it goes forward. But of course, like I said, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think. So definitely let me know in the comments below if you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Definitely don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But of course, again, like we always say on this channel, as always, just remember to keep it A+. See you later.